You're listening to Extraordinary Work, conversations about creating change. I'm Terry Yoffe, founder of Try Coaching. Throughout my career, I've worked in many industries, from fashion to advertising to sales. I'm a certified executive, career and business coach, and a TV and podcast host. This podcast will connect you with people who work passionately, striving to make a difference in their corner of the world. I hope these authentic and inspiring conversations will help you channel your ability to create change. This is episode 13, Extraordinary Work, Conversations about Creating Change, is brought to you by Transcend Capital, helping people better understand new investment opportunities and wealth management by exploring high growth opportunities, commercial real estate, and ways to reduce their tax exposure. My guest is Dr. Jeffrey Hull, the Executive Director at the Institute of Coaching, a Harvard Medical School affiliate, and also a clinical instructor in psychology at Harvard Medical School, and CEO of Leadership, a leadership development consultancy in both New York City and Amsterdam, Holland. He is also the author of the best-selling book, Flex, The Art and Science of Leadership in a Changing World. Jeff believes that the world today needs a whole new way of thinking about leadership. No more pyramids, no more top-down bosses, and his passion lies in coaching leaders to take a more active role in redefining how they view that corner office, and how inclusion of culture, background, race, gender, and nationality are part of today's shift in the business landscape. Jeff, welcome. So wonderful to have you here today. So I always love to start with, tell us a bit about how you got to where you are.
Well, thank you, Terry, for having me. I appreciate it. How did I get to where I am today is always a difficult question because it's a circular journey, as with most of us. But I can trace it all the way back to when I was in college, and I can say that even then, my favorite courses were related to psychology. And so I was always interested in what motivates people and how to have effective relationships, whether it was with family or significant others or in the workplace. So even early in my career, I was probably already thinking that coaching might end up being something that I would do, but I didn't know at the time that it was even a profession.
Right, exactly.
So I did a rather circuitous path of going into HR initially, of going back to school to get a PhD in psychology, in becoming licensed and doing psychotherapy for a few years. And then as I transitioned to doing more life coaching kinds of work with some of my former corporate clients in HR, that was when coaching was beginning to turn into a profession. And there was a particularly momentous shift when I attended the Harvard Institute's early conferences on coaching and the science behind coaching. And that's when I knew that it could be a profession, and I knew I wanted to be part of it. So, and here we are quite a few years later, and I'm not only part of the profession, but I'm actually working at the Harvard Institute of Coaching. So
yes, that's
congratulations for the way it's turned out.
Became the executive director this year.
Who would have ever guessed? I started out as a volunteer.
Right. Yeah. When I became a coach, I went on the ICF New York chapter, their board, they're a board member, a secretary, and, fast forward, I became president. So,
Wow.
you
Congratulations.
just never know. I mean, that was a
That's
while
right.
ago. But I love what I talked about in your introduction, and how the world today needs a whole new way of thinking about leadership. No more pyramids, no more top down bosses. And your passion really lies in coaching leaders to take a more active role in redefining how they view the corner office, and inclusion, culture, background, gender, a part of today's shift in the business landscape. Please expand upon that a bit and talk about why this is so necessary today.
Well, I think the underlying theme in all of what you just articulated quickly and beautifully is that in order to solve the huge problems that we face as a human race on the planet, whether it's climate change or social justice or economic devastation or political challenges, political breakdowns. In order to solve these issues, what do we need? We need creativity and we need innovation. And creativity and innovation comes from everyone, not just those few that sit at the top of the pyramid. And so the most creative and innovative organizations are realizing that they have to leverage the human resource that they have, the human talent. And how do you do that? Well, you do it by creating an environment that nurtures and engages and motivates and inspires all the different people that are part of your organization. And those people are multicultural, they're multigendered, they come from all over the world. And so the need to expand and exploit all the diversity that we have in organizations is actually an imperative for success. And so the leaders that are beginning to realize that are the ones that are going to really sort of take a leap beyond the traditional, more hierarchical top-down organizations where there's just a few mostly white guys sitting at the top, making all the decisions. And that's great, except that they're not leveraging the gifts and the talents if they're not really setting up an environment where they're listening and nurturing the creativity from everyone. So that's really the core theme that I am sort of passionate about these days, is getting the creativity and the innovation and even the leadership from everyone, not just the top.
Do you think that's wonderful? And I wish I had a mega microphone that you could be standing on top of a building and just blurting all that out for everyone to hear. Do you think part of that thinking came about with the pandemic, with the whole great resignation, the great rethinking, the great imagining? Or alternatively, was that already on the horizon before all of the last 2 years took place?
Yes and yes. I would say that it was already evolving in that direction. I mean, I wrote my book Flex about leadership agility and coaching the next generation of leaders just as the pandemic was hitting. And I, at that time, was already writing about case studies of leaders that are creating hybrid, fluid, flexible environments that are reinforcing psychological safety with an open to inclusion and equity for the next generation of leaders to emerge that are with more women, more people of color, more people in the LGBTQ community, more people from different countries. So I was already speaking to this, and it was already happening. But what the pandemic did is it made all of us realize a couple of key things. Number one, that life is very fragile.
Right.
that, in the space of just a very, very short few months, there were literally hundreds and thousands of people that were getting extremely ill, many of whom were dying. And that just made us all aware, I think, of the fragility of life and of also the small nature of the planet that we live on. Like, these things were not just happening in New York or just happening in China. They were it was happening, and it continues. It's getting better, but it was happening all over the world. So, I think the fragility of life really became evident to all of us. And then the second thing is the recognition that if we're going to emerge from this pandemic and then make sure that there are no future pandemics, that we are prepared to take care of the planet in a different level of, with a different level of care, a different level of compassion, a different level of service, then the organizational leaders that we work with as coaches, for example, need to start to think more about the impact of what they do, the health, the wellness of both their employees, but also of the earth itself. It was already happening, but it just accelerated.
Right. Became more crystal clear.
Right.
In your working with leaders, how do you work with them in ways that they can start to use their platform and their voice to really help create change, not only in their organizations, but today with so much going on, my hunch, my sense is perhaps leaders' voices are going to emerge as defining moments, perhaps, of where we all may be going, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the key to my work with leaders in this context that you're bringing up is to step back and create a dialogue that includes values for them as individuals, to really think about the alignment of their personal values with the organization, with their passion, and with their influence. And this is a new conversation, or one that's maybe not new, but not often spent energy and time on for many leaders. What are the key things that they most care about, that they're most passionate about? If they say, for example, well, I care most about my children, or I care most about my family, which would be very typical, I think. But then I would ask them, if that's true, then what is your commitment as a leader to influence the world to make it a better place for those people that you value, your children, your grandchildren? How are you aligning your personal values with your organization's values? And how are you using your influencing skills to make sure that you're living your values? Yeah. So that's the kind of thing that I think I would engage in with leaders, because it's about their influence.
Right, absolutely. And when you lay that out for them, what is their reaction? How they go, oh my goodness, I never thought of that. Or, yeah, that's been on my mind. How do I kind of expand out?
Well, I think it runs the gamut from, you're bringing up questions that I don't have time for, or that I haven't really thought about, all the way to the recognition that my values, my personal values, are actually getting squashed by the organization that I work for, or are actually in contradiction to the organization I work for, which can be very painful for a lot of leaders, to recognize that they may be out of alignment. The environment that they're working in is actually not aligned with their personal values is a big wake-up call. And that often leads to inner conflict of the recognition that, I need a paycheck. I need to bring a certain amount of economic stability to my family. And that puts me in a potentially bind or a paradoxical situation. Right. But that is a good opening, because it can lead to a conversation about where can you influence the organization to move in a direction that could be more aligned with your values.
Yeah, that is interesting and quite insightful for people to start to look at that thread, if you will. I'm wondering, with what's happening in the country and the world, how can these leaders, organizational leaders, lead the way or start to reflect how government leaders can shift their mindset, if that's possible, or if this is a loaded question?
Oh, I think it's absolutely possible. And I think you're seeing some role models. You may not hear about them as often, but there are CEOs, for example. I'm thinking just off the top of my head of the CEO of Heineken. This is a company that produces a product of, that we all know well. It's a beer company, right? But his name is Dolph. I'm forgetting the last name, but he's recently made quite a few very public statements about the importance of creating an environment in the workplace that nurtures human well-being, that creates a work balance for his employees, that creates the highest level of human performance by not overworking, by not creating burnout. So he's supporting and serving the needs of his employees, and also creating a footprint, a climate footprint in the future where, I don't remember the exact percentage, but something like 90 to 95% of all the product materials that they use are recyclable. So here you have a beer company,
right?
Who is at the very top of that company. The individual is thinking with his senior team about how to create a sustainable product, how to support and nurture well-being in the employees. I'm sure he would argue that beer should be drunk in moderation, and that it's not about going on beer fest over drinking. So just as an example of the fact that even a beer company can be driven by values that are human nurturing and that are potentially sustainable for the planet. I just was on a United Airlines flight, and the CEO came on the video saying that they are committed within the next 10 years to be net zero in their emissions. Now, I'm not sure how he's going to do that with airplanes,
right?
But I'm going to take him at his word that that is the commitment. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I mean, some of it is probably marketing.
Right.
But some of this change is being driven by leaders who are really getting reconnected to the values that they most care about.
When we talk about all the companies, all the corporations, all the organizations, certainly not everyone is on board, right, with this thinking. How do we get them? This may be a very large, question, but how do we get more than we have already to start thinking along those lines? What do you think it's going to take? And I know you don't have a crystal ball and you can't look in it, but you work with enough people, you're tapped in to the organizational world.
Yeah, I think I can't give you a broad brush answer to that because it's too difficult. But I will say There's probably two key elements that come to my mind, or two key themes that come to my mind as a psychologist, probably more than anything else, which is really my area of expertise.
Right.
One is that we need, as coaches and as support people, whether it's trainers, coaches, therapists, whatever we are, we need to be aware that the vast majority of resistance to the kind of change you're talking about is driven by fear.
Right.
Fear and of so change. If we can have fear of change, fear of loss, fear of disengagement, fear of whatever, losing an identity, that kind of thing, those kinds of human fears are often at the heart of resistance to change. So if we have an awareness of that, then we can start with empathy and courage and compassion and listening. So that's one thing. And I think the other component of this fear that I'm pointing to is fear of the other, which is fear of the unknown, fear of people that are different from me, right? Feeling this sort of false wall that exists between people of color, between people of different cultures, gender wars, political barriers. Right. I always remind people, without trying to take a political stance one way or the other, but I always remind people that this sort of incredible conflictual dialogue around, let's say, the border between Mexico and the US, which is endemic in our Western culture, those of us who are from America especially, but the world has heard about it. That border is artificial. It doesn't exist. If you're on the moon and you're looking at North America, you're not going to see a wall. You're not going to see a border between Mexico and the US. Right. Those countries didn't even exist 300 years ago. They're all evolved artificially. So the fear of the other on the other side of the wall is something that as human beings, we get stuck in. Right. And it's not going to go away anytime soon until we have the support to feel that we recognize that other people are human just like us. That's where coaches can be valuable, is to have those reflective moments to say, what are you afraid of? Right. I mean, are they really that different? Right. And when we wake up to realizing that we're all really very similar and that we live on a very small little dirt ball called the earth.
Right. Exactly. My God.
It all starts to be a little less scary. And maybe that's how we make some change.
This is so brilliant. I love everything you've had to say. It's just so relevant to where we are today, and wanting to work with people that can use their platform and their voice to create the changes that are so necessary. And as coaches, we hope to be able to elicit that, right, from our clients, to help them go out and get over their fears and stand up and look at what's going out and being willing to say, wait a minute, we need to shift the dialogue, the conversation.
Right.
What's one, I could go on with you for hours here. What's one last thing you might want to add, or one tidbit you want to let everybody know?
Well, I think you're talking at the core of our conversation, we're really talking about how to create a context for transformation. How can we, as coaches, support our clients in a loving, empathic, compassionate way to have less fear, more hope, more movement, more transition toward a nurtured, healthier planet, healthier world. And I think one of the core questions that I use, that I feel is really a powerful place for coaches to enter into a space with clients that are sometimes resistant or fearful or maybe stuck in their ways, is to ask them, what do you want your legacy to be?
Mm-hmm.
You're only going to be on this planet for a certain number of
Mm-hmm.
years, and you want to be remembered. What do you want to be remembered for?
Mm.
That's the kind of question that we don't ask every day,
No.
that we don't think about every day.
Right.
But coaches can get away with those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
questions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I encourage the coaches that are listening to this, take the bait, ask that big, deep, rich, powerful question and get your clients to think, what do you want written on your gravestone? Who do you want to talk at your memorial? If you only had 5 more months to live, what would you do? Or 5 more years? Those kinds of questions.
Right. So
those are the ones that really are eye-opening for a lot of leaders.
My last question, what do you want your legacy to be now that you opened the door?
I get a little bit of my own medicine, right?
You're already living it.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's about using whatever talent, power, voice, gifts that I have to empower others to have a ripple effect in the world that makes a small or hopefully large impact towards making it a better world for humans and for non-humans alike. That would be my dream.
That's on that note, I couldn't think of anything else to say except, Jeff, thank you so very much. This has been quite eye-opening, quite informative, quite insightful, and I so appreciate your joining me today. You have no idea how much it means to me.
My pleasure. I wish you all the best.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review on Apple and subscribe to future episodes. You want to listen to our next episode with Janet Suber, founder and president of Ground Up Africa, as she takes us on her journey from the world of magazine salesmanship to the world of Africa, where she is taking an active role in creating change by helping break the cycle of poverty in rural Uganda. Thank you for joining the conversation. For related content on extraordinary work, visit my website, trycoaching.com. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another conversation. Be sure to follow this podcast so you don't miss an episode. If this resonates with you, I welcome your rating and review. Always remember, when you work with passion and purpose, your work can become extraordinary.